The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We're coming to you through the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. We can also be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring the Symphony of Life. The first time it happened, it took me a while to notice. I got up one morning and decided to start the day with ceremony, then walked the dog as usual. The rain started just as we returned to the house. After dressing for work, I stepped out to go to the car, and the rain stopped, only to resume again as soon as I was safely in the vehicle. On the way to work, for no obvious reason, I noticed I was driving unusually slow. Well, unusual for me. Suddenly, an oncoming car hydroplaned and veered into my lane, just as the road widened, providing ample room and time to dodge. Had I been going faster, we would have collided. Construction work ahead narrowed the road to single-lane traffic and flagmen, but I was the last vehicle they let through before stopping everyone behind me. As I drove down the street where the office was, a car pulled out of the parking spot directly in front of my building, and I pulled into it. I was digging around in my purse for the office building keys when a man I knew from the other suite walked out and held the door for me. I'd forgotten lunch, but no worries. The lovely Mexican lady that came through selling tamales once a month showed up a day early. On and on it went until I could no longer ignore the synchronicity. It was downright uncanny and continued throughout the day. That evening, while puzzling over the strange phenomenon, it hit me. The ceremony that I had opened my day was designed to unite a person with all of their relations and put them in the flow of life. In their own way, my many shamanic teachers tried to impress upon me there's really no separation between us and the world in which we live. There's an ebb and a flow to the way life works. A symphony of waveforms that moves through all things. The only ones out of sync with this symphony are humans. Somewhere along the line, we decided we had a better idea. Rather than move with the promptings of the natural world, why not conquer it, harness it to our will and bidding? Laughable, really, when you think of it. The entire universe and beyond moves in perfect synchronicity. When something or someone bucks it, well, it's no mystery who will end up on the losing end of that little equation. Through the use of shamanic ceremony, an organized set of rituals designed to enable the practitioner to commune with the quantum level, I'd managed to enter the universal flow. Then, by absently following my promptings, I found myself in the right place at the right time, doing exactly what I needed to be doing. It was absolutely effortless, and it is our birthright. Can I maintain the alignment? Not always. The influence of the human world is very pervasive. It's extremely difficult to live in that illusionary world and not be influenced by it. Can I achieve unity at times? Yes, absolutely. Through mindfulness, ceremony, intent, and following my promptings, I can once again hear the symphony and become a participant in the amazing choreography of life. When in that flow, everything has meaning. Every bird that flies by, every cloud in the sky has a message just waiting to be interpreted. This is known as omenology, an aspect of every shamanic practice on the planet. By observing and aligning with everything in the natural world, I'm guided to that sweet spot in the crashing wave. I get to ride on top of the wave in the sunshine rather than dragged along the bottom in the undertow. Same wave, totally different experience. These are volatile times of rapid change. How we personally experience them is completely dependent upon our ability and willingness to clarify our intent, listen to the symphony of life, find our place within it, and dance. Our guest this hour, Dr. Gibbs A. Williams, author of many fine books including Demystifying Meaningful Coincidences, is a psychoanalyst and supervisor, instructor in private practice in New York City. He received a BA from Columbia College, majoring in philosophy, an MA from Yeshiva University, and a PhD from New York University. His choice of profession is an outgrowth of four major interests: philosophy, depth psychology, spirituality, and the esoteric occult. Gibbs has been researching synchronicities, or meaningful coincidences, for over 45 years and has lectured and taught widely on the subject. After this commercial break, I'll introduce Dr. Williams, and together we'll explore synchronicities, science, and the symphony of life. So don't go away. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Dr. Gibbs A. Williams, author of many fine books, including Demystifying Meaningful Coincidences or Synchronicities. His website is gibbsonline.com. That's www.gibbsonline.com, and drgibbswilliams.com. Gibbs, thank you for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Pleasure to be here.
Your work with coincidences or synchronicities is pretty impressive, spanning over 45 years. How did you first get interested in the topic?
I, fortunately, at age 19, when I had a functional breakdown in my sophomore year of Columbia University, started keeping what turned out to be 37-year journal. And when I look back at what was in the journal, I somehow became interested in coincidences, and my 45-year investigation of them was largely based upon, over that span, 19 what I consider major synchronicities, which was great because it enabled me also to understand what the context was out of which they were embedded.
So how is that context important?
Oh, I think it's critically important. And from my vantage point, I think my uniqueness in researching this extraordinarily interesting and complex material is that, let me say, go to the bottom line. I think that they're basically messages not from some transcendent realm of spirituality, although that's very seductive. My experience is that they are essentially messages from oneself, and they're really making a connection with one's idiosyncratic creative process, and they need to be interpreted as if they were waking dreams.
Now you've got me intrigued. Okay, so how do coincidences in the outside world come from the individual?
Well, I don't want to make a pitch for reading my book, but it's got a very detailed flow of many years of arriving at that point. I must say that, see if I can give a rough background. From a very early age, figure about 17, I was the kind of person that somehow was always, I guess, philosophical. I was very much interested in trying to find what I would call absolute answers to very challenging questions, such as, who am I? What am I doing here? Is there a meaning to life? How do you know it? And that kind of material. I read a seminal book called Story of Philosophy, which I recommend everybody go out and buy. And on the bus back to my home, which was Miami Beach, Florida, as I was reading these lines from dead people from 2,000 years, these philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and so forth, they were making more sense to me. It was like I was in the company of people speaking my language, or I guess really I was in the company of people that I spoke their language. And I felt closer to those people than I felt ever growing up at home. And it was intimacy at first glance, and I felt like there is absolute truth and absolute meaning. Now, of course, it contradicted. If Plato was all right, and then Aristotle's all right, and Spinoza's all right, then they tended to clash, and I got confused with what I would call information overload. That then led to Columbia, where I got thoroughly confused, which I think is the basis for a good education. Had a breakdown, went into 2 attempts to straighten myself out through psychotherapy with 2 rather well-known therapists for 6 years, twice a week, very expensive. And at the end, came out feeling like I wasn't really significantly different than the first day I went into it, largely because I really didn't know what therapy was. And I figured therapy is called go to a therapist. Now it's going to a therapist that makes sense to you. And I took a long time to realize that. In any event, I tried hard to understand what my chaos was all about, and really felt that that need was not being addressed in therapy, and I was overloaded with information from school. And I got attracted to the esoteric occult through a relationship with a sculptor, and he said, you ought to go to church on Sunday. I said, I'm not a believer. He said, you'll be a believer in this one. I attended the First Spiritualist Church of New York for 5 years, in which I met some really interesting people. Among them was a rather well-known psychiatrist who, when I tell you what I did after church service, you'll hopefully understand why I got impressed. He went into trance frequently and dictated what he believed was poetry from Freud and Jung. And there were multiple other people who were on the same level, and that really intrigued me. Meanwhile, I was also invited to go to, I guess it's seances or spiritual development classes and so forth. Among them, that was led by a very fascinating 88-year-old woman, medium, and during the first occasion that I went to, she said, there were 7 or 8 of us in a circle, and the lights went out, and she said, say what comes to mind, and I facetiously said, darkness, and she said, all right, why don't you just, you're right, but continue to tell me what you saw. And what I saw in my mind's eye was an ovular frame, yellowish, and in the middle of this ovular frame was what I defined as a grandmotherly figure. And Agatha, the medium, said, well, whose grandmother is that? Now, I was sitting next to a pretty woman, and I sort of facetiously free associated or had an opportunity to talk to this other woman next to me, and I said, oh, that's obviously, let me make up her name, Barbara's grandmother. And Barbara said, well, how do you know that? And I said, because she has granny glasses. And she said, right, I have those granny glasses on my mantle at home. Now, this began a series of synchronicities that evening, which really lit me up. It was very similar to your experience of at the beginning of the program. It was like one thing after the other, and I got goosepimples and more hair-raising goosepimples as we went on. After I left that evening, I had been interested in my mind, and this is why context is so important. What was not troubling me, but what was my area of interest, was, do miracles really exist? Now, I had majored in philosophy, and I was aware that my philosophy teachers would say, or they would probably poo-poo spirituality and try to make it all reasonable, which is fine, and I thought that was true. On the other hand, I realized if you make an assumption that everything is basically connected and that the connection is consciousness, and the consciousness is good and revelatory, then there are many different systems. I had also, taken astrology and handwriting and tarot and really studied it. And I thought these are all pathways into this, unity, if there is. So in that particular evening, I asked the question, do miracles exist? On the way out, feeling super pumped up from the experience I had with Agatha and this woman, somebody said, if you really want to know the answer to these interesting questions, if you happen to have a Bible at home, which I did, ask the question when you get home, turn to a page, open it, and say the first line that comes to mind, and you'll have your answer. So I figured, all right, fine. So meanwhile, I'm half skeptical, and I'm half thinking to myself, if any of the Columbia professors know what I'm about, they'll take away my diploma. And the other half of me is saying, maybe there's something to it. Let me keep an open mind and see. All right, go home. Do miracles exist? I open the Bible. The first thing I see is the raising of Lazarus. And I think to myself, now that is really pretty cool. Now that's not the first synchronicity. That gave me an opportunity to call this woman and tell her in my excitement, what had happened to me post that interesting evening. So I called her and I said, look, I had this incredible experience with the Bible and the raising of Lazarus. She said, no, let me tell you my experience first. And I figured, all right. She said, on that day, before she came to the session, she was walking in the park with her obviously unconventional psychiatrist, this guy who went into trance, and he said to her, in a past life, he was at the raising of Lazarus. Now, when I heard that, I absolutely jumped out of my skin. I thought that was the second major synchronicity I had. And then after that, I had 17 other what I would call whoppers that really got me really interested to the point of what is going on here.
I got a question, Gibbs. When you first started this, you said that you were just kind of free form, saying the first thing that came to your mind. Do you think that played in with connecting with that flow of life?
Well, in analytic term, I'm a psychoanalyst, and I'm a Freudian, non-Jungian. And Freud indicated, or his first patient and he indicated that the method that they were using to get at the psychological truth of whatever matter you got on your mind is to free associate, meaning just say what comes to mind and try not to censor. Easily said, very hard to do. Nevertheless, that's the way I work. Now, that's analyzing. Now, you don't analyze everything. You only analyze something when, after you've attempted to have a person get out of a feeling of stuckness, which essentially is therapy, you analyze when it appears that all roads lead to still being stuck, and then you go back to origins, and you get to origins by priming somebody's memory.
Pretty fascinating. So the free association goes back in, gets past the stuck place into the subconscious?
Yes, and what I have discovered in my research in synchronicities, which is really, it's a fantastic topic. Just when I think I have my arms around it and there's really nothing more to be said and I'm bored with myself, I find some other opening or some other we're going to those periods now.
We're going to have to take a quick break, Gibbs, but on the other side, I want to pick up with this fascinating subject about synchronicities. Dr. Williams and I will return to our discussion after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Previous broadcasts through thought-provoking episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. We will be back, so don't you go away. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Dr. Gibbs A. Williams, author of many fine books, including Demystifying Meaningful Coincidences or Synchronicities. His website, gibbsonline.com, and drgibbswilliams.com. We were really having fun getting into synchronicities, and I have to ask, how does a person know when they're dealing with synchronicity? How can we be more conscious of that?
Good question. The difference between a coincidence and a synchronicity is the special meaning that a person attributes to the event. From my vantage point, synchronicities are amazing experiences that are clearly stand out from the normal humdrum routine of daily living. And you scratch your head and you say to yourself, isn't that amazing, the timing, or where did that come from, or how did that happen? And, when it stirs your curiosity and it seems out of the ordinary and you can't really spill it out in normal cause and effect terms, that's a synchronicity.
Okay. So there are two different things in your book. So a coincidence is a naturally occurring thing. A synchronicity is one that has meaning for you?
Coincidences happen all the time. The alarm clock, if you have an alarm and it's set for 7 o'clock and it goes off, that's a stimulus, and if you respond to the 7 o'clock alarm, you will get up and start to go to work. That happens every day, if that's what you have, and that, in a way, is the general way we make sense out of the raw data of experience. This is the basis for habits, stimulus response, and then we form habits. And we just do it, and we don't think about it. The alarm goes off at 7, we get up, we go to work. That is a coincidence of the alarm and you setting it. Let me give you a synchronicity. If you happen to look at the clock and you know the alarm has set for 7, and you happen to see that unbeknownst to you, you sort of messed up the alarm, the way the clock works, and you look at it and you see the numbers 3333, and it has gone off at 7, but somehow or other you've messed up the mechanism, so it looks 3333. All right, no big deal. However, on the radio program that you're listening to, somebody is talking about numerology, and they are saying that it's extraordinary how many times you can see runs of numbers, and this particular person who's talking says, like, for example, I keep seeing 3333 all over the place. Not unusual, happens all the time. It's not just numbers, it's words, it's people, it's anything. Any pattern that keeps repeating and repeating almost simultaneously or in a small amount of time is something that generally you would scratch your head. That's a synchronicity. Gotcha.
Okay. In the way I work, I find that what I'm intending in any given time, it's very important for me to track that, because when I start having synchronicities happen around me, if I track back to what I've been intending, it makes the message clearer to me. Can you speak to that?
Yes, glad you mentioned. I have found in my research there are basically 5 different perspectives. Sometimes people use all 5, sometimes you just focus on one. The first one is simply noticing patterns, like the 333 or 1122. Those tend to be master numbers in numerology and whatever, car plates, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's the kind of thing when you scratch your head and you say, this is uncanny, that is, and you collect these things, and there are people that will just exchange their collection of the latest synchronicities. If you continue to do that, only, that's fascinating and more power to you. However, from my vantage point, it has the equivalent function of being like a shot of heroin, and I have facetiously indicated that people who do this are possibly synchronicity junkies. I don't mean to be insulting, but that's the truth of it. That's my truth.
I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that, where people try to assign meaning to everything to the exclusion of living life.
Well, it's what it is it moves to the second level, and the reason why they do it is because they get this, what Jung would call numinous experience of the uncanny. And this is the basis for why I think the study of the researching these issues is, it's at the interface between science and so-called spirituality, and it's really it's in the air. There's no question about it. And it's a tough subject, and to speak intelligently about it is not simple. So that initially I was enthralled with Jung's take on this thing, in which he says that this goes to the third thing, which is that when you get these things, it does have the sense that they are messages coming from some external area of experience. Some people call it spirituality, some people call it cosmic consciousness. Doesn't matter what it is. It comes transcended to the self. And there's then the explanation is that you're connecting both with your own psychology plus this other objective area of, let's call it, spirituality. In any event, this is where I became interested in, I pushed it further, and I found that Jung, his conclusion that these things cannot possibly be scientifically investigated, and because you can't pin them down, they're like flashes, and in order to be scientific, you have to be able to pin these down. You can't do it, and so on. So he concluded that linear causality can't really make these things understandable, so he adopted this principle of acausality, which from my vantage point is a cop-out. There's still cause, you just didn't go further. I did, and I thought to myself, all right, let's say they're messages, and let's say they're from some external plane of reality. Well, messages from who or what? And why am I being contacted? What's so special about me? And why isn't everybody getting this stuff? And if they are, it tends to mean different things to different people. So that's the basis for my research, which was posing these questions and then trying to, I guess what I would call it is objectifying my own subjective. And in so doing, I got to the fourth level, which is how do you explain these things? And while he says, A, you can't explain them, being this Columbia, smart aleck philosophy student, I thought to myself, well, that's ridiculous. You're making certain assumptions about the nature of reality and so on. And what I discovered is, and this is why context is so important, that that the serious investigation of these phenomena obligate a person to become intimately familiar with aspects of speculative philosophy, depth psychology, science, scientific method, spirituality, and what I call the esoteric occult. And each one of these things has certain basic assumptions about the nature of reality and how you make sense out of reality. And depending upon your own predilection, each is going to lead to a different way of understanding meaningful connections or meaningful synchronicities. And part of what I find fascinating is that this topic is historically in an ongoing debate between those who are students of Plato versus students of Aristotle, and you have the spiritual side, and you have the scientific side, which culminates in the ongoing dialogue between Jung, who essentially was a Platonist, and Freud, who was essentially an Aristotelian, and then maybe you get I think what's going on now is that there's a third area that's trying to make some kind of synthesis between the two. The fifth level of perspective in terms of these amazing events has to do with, irrespective of your theory or your explanation, what do you do with them? How can they be used, and can they be used to what end?
That's amazing. So the how can we use them is bringing it back into total practicality.
Absolutely.
And I think I would love to really get into this on the other side of a break we're going to have to take here. So our guest this hour is Dr. GIBBS Williams, and he is going to be back with us on the other side of this break. I'll be back on the flip side of this commercial break. You're listening to The Science of Magic on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. You can always listen to us on www.thescienceofmagic.net. We'll be back. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. Our website is www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Dr. GIBBS A. Williams, author of many fine books, including Demystifying Meaningful Coincidences. His website, gibbsonline.com, and drgibbswilliams.com. As promised, we were going to talk about how do we use this in ordinary reality. What's the practical use of these synchronicities?
Gwilda, when I give workshops, I found the following introduction helpful. Imagine you're going to a one-trick magic show, and the magician gets up to the audience and says, look, I'm going to perform a trick, and I guarantee you all that you're going to be wowed by this thing. And at the end, I'm going to give you a choice. So he does his magic. And as predicted, everybody in the audience is just carried away. They're cheering and clapping. He says, okay, now, I said I was going to promise you a choice. Here's my choice. This is a trick. And if you want to be able to be awed as many times as you wish, I will let you come in free, and you can see the trick done as many times as you wish, no extra charge. However, there are going to be a bunch of you that are going to feel somewhat cheated because since it's a trick, those who are curious are going to want to know, how'd you do it? So for that group of people, if you wish, you'll separate out from the people that are going to continue to come back in, and I will show you how the trick is done. Now be careful of what you want. If you want to just be awed and feel like you're in the presence of numinosity, some people call it spirituality, and you're just going to get off on it, then come back and I'll charge up. I know how to do that. If, however, you want to know how the trick is done, I will show you in detail. Now, be careful. It's going to rob you of a certain amount of magic. However, I think you're going to get something better. You're going to learn how to connect to your own personal creative process, and you can use that as over and over again, and you can wow yourself with that process. Your choice. Okay, now, what do you do with these things? Let me give you a couple of examples of what I do with people who want me to help them interpret their synchronicities. One of the first that I heard of that really floored me was the following. There was a woman, very nice woman, who had met a man in New York City on New Year's, and they fell instantly in love. And it turns out that this particular man was a famous saxophone player. Let's call him Harry Green. And they were going. Actually, they were getting married at New Year's Eve, and they were going to meet. He was out of town, and they were going to meet and go to dinner, and then go on about their business. Exactly 12 o'clock on New Year's Eve at the Empire State Building. So she's all excited and waiting for Harry Green to show up. He doesn't show up. And she felt absolutely unconsolable and thought something must be going on. She trusted him, and she felt, oh, my God, what happened? And she was devastated. She made a call to local hospitals and discovered that, indeed, Harry Green, on the way to the Empire State Building, had a heart attack and died. And, of course, tragedy. Years later, she moved to California, and she had asthma. And she still maintained that, this very close tie to Harry Green, his lost lover. And in the midst of this horrible asthma attack, she was hospitalized, and she felt like maybe she's going to die. And at a point where it really felt as if she was evenly distributed between living and dying, over the squawk box in her room came the announcement, Harry, would you please go into the green room? And she was shocked in a very good way, and attributes the fact that of her shock to helping her breathe and recover from this horrible asthmatic attack, which probably indeed saved her life. Now, I ask anybody who heard this and was impressed with this really impressive synchronicity, what kind of meaning would you give to that? What would you conclude? How would you go about trying to understand what that was all about? And this leads back to context now. If you look at it from the vantage point of just an interesting story, it's easy to get to some point of she made some kind of connection with universal consciousness, and a master teacher rescued her, and the timing was perfect, and maybe the dead, talked to the alive, and you get my point. It's easy to get there, and indeed may be true. I don't know the truth of it, but that's certainly one possible explanation. Well, that's what drove me into kind of the possible explanations, and from my vantage point, I've learned that if you put these things into the context of an ongoing journal, and a journal is not a diary. A diary is you had eggs for breakfast and all that stuff. A journal is anything that moves you in terms of something, an insight, a new way of viewing things. You put that in and you date it. If you have a synchronicity, you date that and you fit the two together so you have the context in which these things occur. Bottom line, my experience is that synchronicities always begin from the vantage point of a real live individual having what they feel is an unresolvable problem, either in the areas of being or doing. They're stuck. Their attitude to the stuckness is critical. If they give up or turn to drink or suicide or murder or whatever, that's the end of the story. If they are determined to struggle with struggle, I believe that struggle, that I'm not giving up, will begin to turn on an individual's creative process, and the creative process, as close as I can get to it, is sort of looking for clues, as if the clues we're talking about are pieces of a very elaborate jigsaw puzzle, and when you get a clue and you fit it into a frame, once you have enough of those clues, it will form a pattern, and the pattern that's recognizable will be experienced as a meaningful coincidence or synchronicity, which still, because it's in coded form, has to be decoded so you interpret it like a waking dream. In this view, just to sketch what happened to her, I think these experiences tend to go to the heart of what is most important to people. So issues of love and hate and all basic things. What's really meaningful in a person's life? What are you really living for? What's most important? Obviously, her great love that was ruined was critical to her, but she maintained that love feeling. And from my vantage point, it is a coincidence that as she's lying in that bed, maybe on the verge of death, that the squawk box would come back with the obviously meaningful names of Harry and Green room, and that's spooky, nice spookiness. However, from my vantage point, if that had not occurred, sooner than later she would have come across, and this is what life is, something that would have made her personal unconscious conscious and made her have some kind of an awareness of her reconnection with this man of her dreams. I might also add that she was very angry at him, as many people feel, that right at a point where she could have, had this great love relationship probably.
GIBBS, time flies, and I'm afraid we're out of it.
Well, you get my point.
Yeah, I do. This has been so enlightening, and I can't thank you enough for sharing with us. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to Pat's thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge and comforted with love as you dance to the symphony of life.
One people, one nation, searching through the night. One people, one nation, searching for